Hi, hi, hi. Welcome to night 8. I'll just wait a couple of seconds for more people to join. I do apologize in advance if you guys hear a beep. I do need to change the battery on the fire detector. So if there's any beeping, I apologize in advance. Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to night 8. I'm so glad that you are here, those that are here and those that will watch the replay. So thankful that you have taken the time out of your day to really just hear from God and to just receive from His goodness and for what will ultimately help you and all the things of what God has to share for you and your life and your family. So, with that being said, let's get started. For night 8, it's a little bit different with what the Holy Spirit led me to do for tonight. But as the title says, today the topic is about generational patterns and how over the years, over after each generation, it can increase to it being worse. So let's get started. So for this family lineage, we're going to focus on David and where it kind of all began. So yes, so we're going to begin with the second of Samuel, the book of Second of Samuel, chapter 11. Some of us may be aware of Bathsheba, the story that David did to essentially have her as his wife. But for those that are not so familiar with it, I'll just share briefly about the story. So we're going to begin with chapter 11. I'll read verse 1 through 6, and then I'll just briefly go through today's, I guess, what the Lord wants to share with us today. So in the verse 1 it says, "It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab his servants with him and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about the woman. And someone said, 'Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?' Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity. And she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, so she sent and told David, and said, 'I am with child.' So shortly after that, of course, David fell in love with Bathsheba. And he essentially was like, okay, I need to have her as my wife. I want her. So he purposely sent Uriah to the front of the battle, where it's like the gruesome, most dangerous place in the battlefield to just, if either you're strong and if you're not, you're gone within seconds. So that was David's plan. So he sent Uriah, and of course, his plan worked because at the end, Uriah died. Um, he was destroyed from the other from the enemy side, and then and then after, David got to marry Bathsheba. But through the action alone, even before sending Uriah to the battlefield, just the choice that David did when he sent for Bathsheba after he was told that, oh, that's Uriah's wife. He didn't care. He's like, I want her. Don't matter. It doesn't matter if she's married or not. I mean, it doesn't matter if she's married. Bring her to me. So even regardless of him knowing that she was already married, he didn't care. He wanted her. So through that action, it actually opened more doors for his family to be attacked in this type of way. So with that, it essentially goes with through the consequences of that, um, David sent the prophet Nathan to expose David. He told him a similar story, and David got upset about it because he was like, "Oh, this wealthy king, he had many sheep, and then this poor man, he only had one sheep, and the king sent for the poor man's sheep, and David was like, whoever this person is, he's gonna surely die. Bring him here." And then Nathan was like, "Oh, well, that person, that's you." And then that's when then David was like, "Oh man, like even though I tried to do this behind closed doors, God saw what I did, and now I have been exposed for what I did, which was wrong." So in chapter 12, verse 13, it says, "So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, The Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die. However, because by this deed you have given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also who is born to you shall surely die." Then Nathan departed to his house. So, although, of course, God forgave him for what he did to Uriah, but there's also consequences through his actions, which was the baby that was conceived while Bathsheba was still married to Uriah. God was like, this can't continue, so I have to take this child away. But shortly after, in verse 24, it says, "Then David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went into her and laid with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. Now the Lord loved him, and he sent word by the hand of Nathan the prophet. So he called his name Jedediah, because of the Lord." So to continue the kingdom and lineage of David, God still kept his promise, and after King David, it was going to be Solomon who was going to be king after him. But meanwhile, Solomon was growing up and learning and just growing up in the kingdom, learning of God. Of course, he had many wives, so that meant that he had a lot of children. And with one son, this is now chapter 13 in 2nd of Samuel. In chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister, whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick. So Absalom and Tamar had the same mom and same dad, which was King David. And Amnon had a different mom, but same dad, which was King David. So they are essentially still siblings, but through with what David did and just didn't care how he got Bathsheba, he put Uriah to the battlefield. That essentially led for one of his children to go through the same path that he did. So Amnon, even though that was his sister Tamar, he didn't care. Just like King David didn't care whether Bathsheba was married, he didn't care. So the same thing went to his son Amnon, and same like I said, he didn't care even if it was his sister. So he essentially tricked King David to believe that he was really sick because he was so thin. Like this man just kept thinking about his sister and lustful and I don't know what type of ways to be so sick to the point that he couldn't eat. He was just so skinny. He was sick. So one of his friends, I think his name was Jonadab, told him, "Hey, pretend you're like really sick. The king's gonna come to you, check on you, tell him that you want your sister Tamar to look after you, for her to cook for you, and in that moment maybe you can have some time with her." So obviously Amnon was like, "This is a great idea." So he did it. So eventually King David did come see Amnon, checked on him, and Amnon's like, "Please let Tamar," and this is verse 6. He says, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." And since, you know, normally King David was like, "Okay, well, they're siblings. He needs her help. And Tamar, she cooks good, so maybe she can go." So King David sent for Tamar, and Tamar didn't know anything what was going on. She didn't know anything. So she obeyed, she listened. And she went to go bake him the cakes. And Amnon took that opportunity. He's like, okay, send my servants out of the room and come over here and feed me. So that happened. And then sadly, Tamar knew, was like, okay, something's going on here. He just told me he wants me to lay with him. I can't do that. That's going to be a disgrace to me, to the family. Like, that's not what siblings should do. But obviously, Amnon didn't care. So he, sadly forced himself. And since he was stronger, she couldn't escape. So through what David did with didn't care, got Bathsheba, Amnon did the same thing. That pattern continued, like I said, to Amnon. So with Absalom, which is Tamar's full brother, um, he found out what happened, and he was so upset, angry. King David found out. He was also angry. But some time passed, and Absalom took the opportunity to plan something against Amnon to take revenge from what he did to his sister Tamar. So at the end, Absalom committed murder, like he murdered his own brother because of what he did. He was really angry with what Amnon did to his sister, and through that action, Absalom had to flee because if somebody commits murder, they have to also face the penalty, which is also face the death penalty. So Absalom fled, and he fled for some time, but eventually King David called for him, but it took him like 2 years to forgive Absalom. Of course, Amnon, what he did was just horrible, but it really did. It really did take 2 years for King David to fully forgive Absalom for what he did. But through this, we continue on to Absalom now. So it was David, Amnon, and then now Absalom. And so with what Absalom did now, it was the beginning of the division that was going to come soon after him, a couple of generations after. But this is the beginning of the division that happened within Israel, right? So in chapter 15 now, in verse 1, it says, after this had happened, that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was whenever anyone who had lawsuit came to the king for decisions that Absalom would call to him and say, what city are you from? And he would say, your servant is from such and such tribe of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit of cause would come to me, then I would give him justice. So now Absalom is like, okay, I want to take the throne now. I want people to come to me. I want to win the favor of the people because this is what I want. So it goes again with the patterns. He's now doing something that he wants. He wants the throne. And if that means that he has to trick people into liking him, into seeing, oh wow, he's great, he can listen to me because King David, and then for him to make people think, oh, King David is just busy. Like, let's just go to Absalom to win their hearts, to steal their hearts. That's what he wanted to do to get what he wanted, which was the throne. So shortly after, King David finds out what Absalom is doing. Absalom's already receiving praise from the people. People are believing that he's the next king, that he's going to be the king. So King David flees because if he would have stayed in Jerusalem, Absalom, through his ambition and greed for the throne, a lot of innocent people would have died through the battle that Absalom wanted to do to gain the throne in that way. So King David and the people fled. They hid, but at the end, when the battle had to happen, um, when the battle had to happen, God was like either whatever anything that Absalom may do is not gonna be complete. Whatever his plans is going to be destroyed because God already chose Solomon to be the next king. So as we know that anybody can have any plans against us, but it's God's plans that come through, right? So even with the battle, it happened. Obviously, Absalom, he lost the battle, but not only did he lose, but he also tragically died in the battle. So, of course, that left King David sad because that was still his son. He lost two sons, right? But going back is because of that action that King David did. Not only did his ambition or lust for Bathsheba ended with Amnon making a decision against his sister that hurt the family, and then for now Absalom to want the throne, being against his father, but at the end Absalom died. But through Absalom, it was now Adonijah. Let me see. Adonijah, which is chapter. Now we're in the first of Kings, because then when King David died, before he died, mind you, before he died, he had another son who wanted to take the throne. Like a lot of his own sons wanted to take the throne because that generational pattern of getting what they wanted was still there, and it continued to be there. So he had another son called Adonijah, and in chapter 1, verse 5, it says, Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. And his father had not rebuked him at any time by saying, Why have you done so? He was also very good looking. His mother had borne him after Absalom. So we see the connection now. He's a full brother with Absalom, the one prior to him that wanted to take the throne as well. They have the same mom and the same father, which is King David. So through that pattern, now Adonijah was like, I want the throne. I'm going to get it. I'm going to be the next king. Because it goes back to getting what they want, right? In a wicked, malicious, deceitful way. But this time around, the prophet Nathan went to Bathsheba and told her, "Hey, we got to tell King David what's going on, because if not, things are gonna get worse again." And Solomon is the next chosen king after David. So at the end, Bathsheba and Nathan reminded King David. They told him what's going on. So quickly, David anointed Solomon as king. And when Adonijah found out that Solomon was made king, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be in trouble," because essentially he was betraying the king, which is, even though he's his father, he's still betraying him because he's going before him, making choices that the king didn't even approve of. So that's treason. That's going against the king. So he hid, Adonijah hid, and at the end, Solomon was like, "Just go home. I forgive you. Go home. It's not worth it." Right? So after Adonijah, Solomon took over the throne as it was appointed. As he was anointed and chosen by God to do so. Um, and through that, there's some peace, right? we all know. Well, Solomon, he reigned in peace and riches and wisdom. And in now, First of Kings chapter 3, verse 5, it says, At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God said, Ask, what shall I give you? And after, Solomon thanked him and praised him for what God did in his father's life, which is King David's, he's like, and then in verse 9, it says, Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For what is able to judge? For who is able to judge this great people of yours? Of course, God was pleased because he didn't ask for riches or anything else. So God gave him great wisdom and so much riches. I think even here it says that there has never uh, been anyone like him ever, right? So then after Solomon, everything was great. He built the temple for God. Practically everything was made out of gold. Like God gave him all the material that was needed. He was able to have so many chariots, everything, because he was being obedient to God's word. He was serving God. He loved God, right? But sadly, if certain things are not being like, if we don't ask God, what is in my family that you see, that are patterns that are still there, that I'm even fighting, that I don't even know about? Because sometimes we may struggle with something, and I don't know if it has happened to me where I've like, why am I doing this? Why am I like this? Or why do I get like this if this certain thing happens because of what was done in the past? So I've come to God many times, and I still do. I'm like, God, what is it in me that you still see, that is still affecting me, that my past generations did, that are still causing those battles? Because I don't want what I have to be passed on to my son. I don't want him to struggle. I don't want him to fight those battles. And I just want to, come to you, Lord, for you to remove this, for you to help me, and whatever my past family did, for it to not affect me, their consequences to not continue to affect me, right? So if I mean, Solomon probably didn't acknowledge what really happened, or he just maybe forgot about what maybe his father did, or maybe he never found out. But slowly it creeped back with Solomon, because we know that he had many wives. Um, I know for a fact that it says here how many wives, and it was a lot. But for now, I'll just continue on with what happened. And this is chapter 3. No, chapter 11. We're going to chapter 11, First of Kings, chapter 11. And I'll write down all of the chapters and verses below, because I know this one is, because I normally just focus on like one or two chapters and I just continue on with the story. But like I said, God led me to do something a bit different today. But I'll leave everything there because everything just connects with the generational patterns. So now, First of Kings, chapter 11, verse 1 through 4, it says, but King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as a daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it was so when Solomon was old that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. So, going back to David, he lusted over Bathsheba. He wanted her regardless of how he was going to get her. He did it. And then now with Solomon, with married like 1,000, like he was with 1,000 women, maybe even more. He turned away from God because he loved his wives. He loved them. He lusted over them. And I guess at times when we have to be careful too, right? When we have feelings for someone that maybe God did not put in our lives, we have to be careful and pray, right? Just to, for essentially for God to lead us to what He has for us. This is always the best, the very best. So sadly, those patterns that maybe were put aside for a while came creeping back to Solomon, and to what once was with David now was with Solomon, but even like 1,000 times more, because he had so many wives from here, from there, that practice this, that practice that worship this false idol, this false god, and it just brought a lot of destruction into the family, which of course has its consequences. So with what Solomon did, God was very. So in verse 9 it says, so the Lord became angry with Solomon, because his heart had turned from the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he did not keep what the Lord had commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, Because you have done this and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servants. And nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Through Solomon's choices, it caused the Israelites to be divided in two. And which after Solomon, who reigned was Rehoboam. Rehoboam and so Rehoboam reigned after Solomon died. But the thing was that instead of Rehoboam seeking advice from God, he did what he wanted. He wanted to like, oh well, my father was great and awesome. I'm gonna try to be 2 times as best from him from what he ever did. So in chapter 12, verse 3 to 5, it says, what is it? So a man called Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So the people were like, we want to serve you, but we don't want to work so hard. We don't want to carry all of these things. Like, we want to serve you, but we don't want to do and live the way that your dad put us through. So King Rehoboam was like, okay, come back in 3 days. I'll think about it. I'll seek counsel. But although he did receive a good advice, he rejected it. And he said, so after the 3 days were done, and in verse 13 it says, then the king answered the people roughly and rejected that advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to that advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, and I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, and for the turn of events was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word which the Lord had spoken to Ahijah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So with Rehoboam's decisions, his arrogancy, disrespect, and terrible choice, it's like, I'm gonna make you work hard. I don't think anyone would want to work for someone like that. Like, if your work is already hard and you're barely getting through, and for it to be doubled and to be treated poorly, I don't think I don't think anyone would want to stay. Honestly, I wouldn't. But through Rehoboam's arrogancy and trying to prove that he's better, he could be better than his dad. The people were like, you know what? We're not gonna take this. We're gonna leave. We're not gonna stay. And that's when the two kingdoms divided. So now that we're gonna have two kingdoms now. First king, of course, is Rehoboam, and there's 12 tribes in total. The people of Israel were separated in 12 tribes, and only 2 tribes remain with Rehoboam, only because of the loyalty they had towards David. So it was the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. So we're going to focus on the first king, which is Rehoboam, and then we'll focus on the second king after this one, because this one is shorter. But after Rehoboam, Abijam reigned for 3 years. So this one is in chapter 15, verse 3. And it says that Abijam, and he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him. His heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. So just as Rehoboam he wanted to do what he wanted, because obviously Rehoboam was exposed to what King Solomon having this wife and that wife and practicing this, doing that. Like that was normal for Rehoboam. I don't think he really took the teachings. Maybe if Solomon, I'm sure maybe Solomon taught the word of God to his children, but I don't know if they took it to a point where it was something serious because they were exposed to other things. But through that, Abijam continued to do what Rehoboam did. So Abijam continued sinned before God. It was normal, but they didn't have the fear of the Lord because of the things that progressed over David, then Amnon, Absalom, and so on and so forth. That now they just don't want to. They're not following with what God is doing, and by just one act of what David did, it just escalated and escalated. But the good part in chapter 15, verse 9, after Abijam reigned for 3 years, it was Asa who reigned over Judah, who became king over Judah. And in verse 10 it says, and he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His grandmother's name was Maacah, the granddaughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did his father David. And he banished the perverted persons from the land and removed all the idols that his father had made. So I think with that is like now comes a generation is like, okay, I like to evaluate, right? It's always good to evaluate, okay, my family went through this and this. Do I want to continue that? Do I want that for my children? Do I want to go through what they went through? And then that's the moments where we can say, God, you know everything that my family did. Help me to see what I don't notice yet so that I can pray about it. So I can lay it at your feet and for you to remove it, for me to overcome with what once held back my family, with what once brought sin or poverty, anger, whatever it may be. Help me so that I can give it to you and I can be set free so that my family that is to come, then in the new generations, don't have to go through that, don't have to battle through that. So Asa made a decision to say, you know what? I'm going to do right before God. And God blessed him with 41 years to reign over, well, Judah and the land with the tribe of Benjamin, because now that the two kingdoms were divided. But let's go back to the second kingdom. So this happened at the same time with Rehoboam, because since the other 10 tribes were like, you know what, we're not gonna serve you. We're gonna leave. You're not gonna treat us more bad than what your dad did, right, King Solomon. So the 10 tribes seeked another king. And then going back to chapter 12, verse 20. Now it came to pass when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had come back, they sent for him and called him to the congregation and made him king over all Israel. Remember, Jeroboam was the one who came to Rehoboam to say, okay, what are you going to do now? Like, we come before you. We don't want to, suffer the way that your dad made us. So he was the one who made that step. So since Jeroboam made that step, people were like, oh, well, he's going to make a great king because he really cares about us, because he went to Jehoboam and asked him for our good intentions. So with that, Jeroboam was made king. But mind you, we don't know exactly what the past lineage of Jeroboam was. Like, it doesn't exactly go back to what his family was. It just starts with him. So we don't know what's going on. But through his lineage, we're going to see a connection here that you guys might know, or are going to now know. But and then in verse 28, so once Jeroboam was made king, he was worried that maybe the people will go back to Rehoboam. He was worried that they were going to go back, and it's like, if they go back to him, I might be killed, because there's no two kings in one kingdom, right? So it's like, okay, what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to please the people, and I'm going to bring in everything so they can not focus on God. Like imagine to be fearful more of people, to make decisions that are going to bring so much pain, so much, just things that are not good. So it's far more greater to fear God, right? But in this case, it was Jeroboam who decided to please the people. So to please the people, in um, verse 28, it says that the king with Jeroboam made two golden calves and said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem." So he's like, "Oh, you guys don't have to go to Jerusalem." Imagine. He's like, "Oh, you don't have to go to Jerusalem. You can just stay here. I'll make these idols here for you. Be comfortable, stay here." So he says, "Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt." Imagine. So through that, it opened a huge door for the 10 tribes of Israel to go against God, to do evil before God, and for that to just escalate to something even far worse. So now, after Jeroboam continues to do more things, we're gonna go to chapter 15. To now, who the next one is going to reign after Jeroboam, which was Nadab. So Nadab was the next king. 26. Yes. So Nadab reigned after Joab, and he reigned over Israel for 2 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin by which he had made sin over Israel. So, of course, if one is exposed to these things, it's going to appear normal to them. So they're going to do it. But if they don't have the fear of the Lord or that love of the Lord, they're going to do things that are evil before the Lord and then cause more chaos within the family that they're not even aware of. They're doing it because it feels good, it looks right, it makes us happy, whatever it may be, right? But then in so after Nadab, in chapter 15, verse 33 to 34, it says, Baasha, in the 3rd year of Baasha, the son of Ahijah, became king over all Israel in Tirzah and reigned 24 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of Jeroboam and in his sin by which he made Israel sin. So it continued the lifestyle, the false worship, the idols, the sacrifices, the whatever it is that people do in that time to worship these false gods. He continued it. So it just progressed. It continued. The pattern continued to the next generation, right? So after Baasha, Elah reigned. This is now chapter 16, verse 8 to 10, which says, so he reigned for 2 years in Tirzah. Now his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him as he was in Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, steward of his house in Tirzah. And Zimri went in and struck him and killed him in the 27th year. So of course, through having all of these things being done in the family, that gives more opportunities for enemies to attack, for enemies to commit more harmful things within that person, the family. So Zimri, who I guess pretended to be his friend because he was like commander of half of his chariots, he betrayed him because he wanted the throne as well. So Zimri reigned, but this is the thing. He reigned for 7 days because what he did to Elah was done to him. But it was after Zimri, Omri reigned I think he reigned for 12 years. And then in verse 25 and 26, it says, Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord and did worse than all who were before him. For he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and in his sin by which he had made Israel sin, provoking the Lord of Israel to anger with idols. So he just did more and more and more and more wrong. So it just things just escalated, just keep on escalating and escalating, right? But here is the one that we may be aware, that we may know or remember from the story of Elijah. So after Omri was Ahab, the one that was married to Jezebel, the one that started it all, right? But of course, Elijah came through. But with that being said, it's like we can see how everything just escalates. Everything is escalates with these patterns that if we continue to move to proceed without asking God, like God, what is in my family, right? What can you reveal to me the patterns that are still there that are affecting me? I don't want my children to go through it. I don't want my family to keep going through this struggle. Please, Lord, reveal it to me. I surrender it to you. Help me, right? But overall, in conclusion, I know this one's a little bit longer, but it's just really the importance of the generational patterns of for it to be exposed, for it to be canceled in the name of Jesus Christ. But in conclusion, the consequences on how the generational patterns can increase into deeper rebellion. So the more it continues, the more it can just grow and grow and grow, right? More of the things of the world that can cause confusion, division in the family, arguing, fighting, and selfishness, greediness, ambition in the wrong ways, and just wanting power and making decisions made out of lust, out of what benefits them only. So it all just it's mixed in one's life, in the family, even if they're not being like brought to the Lord, like, hey Lord, like I know I'm facing this. I know that for a long time I have just been wanting this life, but for now I see that it's affecting me. I see that it's not good for me. Like I said, I don't want my children to go through it. I don't want my passion the new generations that are to come to go through it. Right? So in David's case, they all wanted to get what they desired. And the thought process was not included because some way or another, they were determined to get what they wanted through using deceit. So deceit was introduced into the family, maybe even before. But for now, we're going to focus on David and from all the people that was shared. They all used deceit because they all wanted what they desired. They didn't care how they were going to get it. They betrayed, they lied, they caused people to die. It'll continued on and so forth. And essentially from not obeying God or or not having God to guide them, to lead them, and how to run the kingdom, because at the end they did what they wanted. Jeroboam decided to please the people instead of seeking God's counsel. So with that being said, it's so important to just say, Lord, help me. Like I don't like. I'll just share a little bit because I know it's a little bit long, but maybe this was like less than 2 years ago where the Lord was really revealing to me things that I wasn't even aware of. Like I was just living my life day by day, thinking that I'm good, I'm saved. I just gotta pray, which is good to pray, right? It's always good to pray. But I wasn't going into deeper prayer because I didn't know how. I wasn't aware of things that were going on within the spirit realm that were attacking me still because of what was opened from the past generations. Until God revealed it to me, until He taught me to how to pray more and what to really just pray against and to bring to His feet and what to seek, what to ask, right? And it wasn't till later where God revealed to me, like, there was anger in my family, there was divorce in my family, there was infidelity in my family, like all of these things that growing up one sees it, one hears it, and thinks it's normal, right? But until He showed me that those things are not normal, those things of arguing, fighting, bickering, and all of these things are not fruit of the Holy Spirit. So it's like if it's not fruit from the Holy Spirit, where else would it come? Where else would it be from, right? So with that being said, it's just always good to pray to the Lord, to seek for His counsel, to seek His truth, to what once held us back cannot hold us back. Okay. So I hope this night 8 has been a blessing. Thank you guys for watching through the whole video. I hope this really just adds just more into your life to seek the Lord, to pray to Him, and to just seek His truth, and ultimately just Him to just lead you, guide you in all of His goodness and in His love. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.